Good afternoon. We're students of the Rehabilitation Sciences, and my name is Esteban Nieto.
My name's Esteban Garcia.
My name is Kayla Nunez.
My name's Jaden Alexander, and we are
Living on the Edge. Welcome to today's video where we discuss para-suicidal behaviors. According to the American Psychological Association, para-suicidal behaviors encompass a range of behaviors involving deliberate self-harm that may or may not intend to result in death. There is a big distinction with suicide and para-suicide, which Kayla is going to help us understand.
So the main difference between suicidal and para-suicidal is that in suicidal, the person intends to die, whereas in para-suicidal, there's that's not the intention, but you do see recurring self-harm. But however, in para-suicidal, the risk is still high, so it could still lead to death if you're not careful with it.
One thing I wanted to add with that before we move on is the information that I got from the same website that you used mentioned that para-suicidal actions usually happen in ages under 45, and suicidal actions happen most likely in the ages over 45. So I thought that was a cool thing before we finish on that. So now that we've gone over the difference between para-suicidal and suicidal actions, I wanted to touch on some examples or how these actions can manifest in a person. So mainly it's a lot of self-harm, like cutting or burning, misuse of drugs and alcohol, and reckless behavior, so like driving fast, just doing things that could lead to suicide, but you don't have the intent to end your life. Touching on some risk factors, so we have three big ones. The first one is change in living situation, so like unemployment, a change in relationship, environment, living situation. Our second one is mental conditions.
Some mental conditions could involve borderline personality disorder, depression, anxiety, eating disorder. It's important to recognize that when we talk about these different aspects, these different factors, it really boils down to, can this person regulate their own emotions? That anger, that sadness, that anxiety, right? That's really like one of the biggest things that can determine if somebody is susceptible to partaking in para-suicidal behaviors. When we look at other aspects like culture, how does culture play a role? Well, sadly in Japan, they put so much stress on children to the point where they're having record numbers of children taking their lives. And yes, there's suicide, right? But before then, there's those para-suicidal behaviors taking place. You know, children telling their parents like, hey, I want to study. I don't want to be living this life. Like, please, you know. So that's the cry for help, if you will. Another factor that can play a role would be the social aspect. Like, you're a man, right? That's a big one in many cultures, right? You can't feel emotion, you know? That's something that, like, if we're just going to be generalizing here, that's something big that can play a factor whether how people try to express themselves. Yeah. It's not healthy.
Yeah, and you know, especially even the Latino culture, the machisto,
Yeah.
not really talking about your feelings, kind of being stone cold, and it's really looked down upon in our culture. So that's really well said.
And that's a really good environmental factor, especially for El Paso. I feel like a lot of men experience that. And then touching on my last risk factor is drug and alcohol abuse. That's a big one.
Yeah, according to the American Addiction Centers, young adults are always at the top of substance abuse. And in 2018, there were an estimated 34.1 million young adults that reported as substance abusers. And that's really who we want to focus on, young adults, especially in our community.
So then moving on to like interventions and treatment. I feel like that's a big chunk of our thing. I read that the first one that people tend to look at is hospitalization, but I know that's real pricey. So is there other better options or more accessible options that we can look into?
Yeah, for interventions for para-suicidal behavior, you have medications such as antidepressants and anti-anxiety, but honestly, the best intervention is therapy or CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. There's a bunch of support groups out there that help with this, and I would like to share a personal experience that I had in one of my classes here at UTEP. they brought in a amazing support group called NAMNI. It's the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and they talked about what NAMNI, the organization, has done for them and done for the community. And it's really such a great organization. We had great, amazing guest speakers talk about stuff such as para-suicidal behavior and, you know, their struggles with their addictions and how, you know, a lot of the risk factors that you were talking about, change in living, against substance abuse, and just how they hit rock bottom, and then they found NAMNI, and, you know, even through the ups and the downs, the relapses and the great moments that they had, you know, they really were able to pull through. And these amazing guest speakers, you know, they gave such an emotional presentation to us. It really stuck with me. So there's a bunch of support groups, not just NAMNI. We have the VA, the Veterans Association. They do a lot of support groups for the veterans. The city of El Paso has their own mental health resources that you can look into. And these are all great sources to help you, great support therapies. And I know Kayla had another, you know, treatment in mind.
Yeah, so to add on your therapies, there's a dialectical behavior therapy, and this helps people manage intense emotions, reduce self-destructive behaviors, and it was actually developed by a woman, a psychologist, Dr. Marcia, in the late 1980s. But what makes this therapy unique is that the acceptance, so validating your experiences and emotions, and the change, so like learning new skills to manage like those emotions, which I thought was like a cool also like therapy that could help out. But going back on like the preventatives, I know you had some examples about it.
I think something really big when we distinguish what can bring about parasuicidal behavior is, you know, the environment, right? And one of those big things can be isolation, you know, particularly in older populations where the UC Davis Health saw that men ages 75 and older have the highest rate of suicide, right? So, I mean, we're talking about parasuicide, suicide. They're very intertwined in their definition, but if we prevent that isolation from coming about, we can prevent that parasuicidal behavior from coming about, right?
And then also we're talking about like young adults, but a lot of us young adults have older people in those age ranges in our lives.
Oh, exactly.
So we can also just even look out for the signs, or maybe even start the prevention now for
Of
our older
course.
family members and loved ones.
Be there for your grandparents. Be there
Right.
for your parents. This is something that you can pay attention to now to prevent something catastrophic happening in the future.
Right.
Exactly. And, you know, and that's a big thing in our community too, the Hispanic community, you know, taking care of your abuelitos, abuelitas, la familia. You got, you know, it's really big for us. And this is a topic that hits close to home for us, especially in our community. Nowadays, I know that you had something to say about that.
Oh yeah, so I have some actually examples. So our examples are here on Instagram. So just reckless behavior, especially with vehicles, and alcohol abuse is a big problem here in El Paso. And I'm sure we've seen this page before, FitFam. It brings awareness to how many accidents and just near death, I want to say parasuicidal actions and behavior are happening here. So this one actually shows a pretty bad car crash that happened late one night, so bad that a helicopter actually had to come and airlift the patient out. So not only is this affecting them and their loved ones like we talked about, it's affecting the community. It's affecting people trying to get home, people getting involved in these car crashes when they're on their way home from work. And even in the comments, like, you can see how concerned people are. Like, one of the comments says, what are we doing to prevent all these accidents? And I think that's a question we're all asking here. Here's another video. Another example is another bad car crash. And these are all happening on our freeways. So, you know, people are speeding, and it's just really affecting the community. So not just them and their loved ones we're thinking about, but like everybody else who's affected, everybody else on the roadway.
Exactly. And I love how you connected that with the lives of others, because if we're being honest, they're not only putting their own lives at risk, but lives of other people who, have families who drive safe. A lot of those accidents happen on I-10 on my way to my house, and it's
Right.
very scary to know that, maybe I'll be driving one day and someone who's just, not really caring about their own life puts my life or maybe even life of my loved one into danger.
Yeah, it's those para-suicidal actions that are affecting not only them that can reach that accidental suicide like we talked about earlier, but affecting everybody else. Your para-suicidal actions could turn into like vehicular manslaughter, and that's just something also to think about.
And that's a good place to wrap it up, guys.
So in conclusion, parasuicidal behaviors and actions are self-harm actions, but they don't have that intent to commit suicide, to lose their life. We went over some factors, some examples, and a big one is just prevention.
I mean, we need to start breaking down these barriers, right? It's the cultural, it's the social. We need to be there for each other,
Right.
provide that support. That's, again, all we have today. If you or anybody you know may be partaking in parasuicidal activity, please reach out to any of the sources we listed earlier in this episode. Again, thank you. You all have a great day. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.